For sure. Yeah, I think the power spot is for sure underutilized in climbing at the moment. Um, but yeah, I think most of the hard boulders that I've done, I've been pushed through first. Um, like not only somebody pushing you into the move, but then also through the movement to try to learn how to do the move with a little bit of weight taken off. It's like similar to if you can't do a pull up, you start doing them with bands to be able to take some weight off. Um, it's similar in climbing. They do it also in other sports, gymnastics. They do it all the time where they take weight off, or the spotter takes weight off to be able to learn to do a backflip. It's a pretty standard method of learned movements in any sport. And yeah, I think we as climbers underutilize that. I don't know if we just like don't want our friends to be touching us or something, but I think it's super. I think people need to get more comfortable pushing each other into the boulder and then also through the movements. It even sometimes just mentally is nice, like if somebody's power spotting you, to just like be able to remind yourself that you're only X high off the ground because your spotter can still like physically touch you.
Right.
But yeah, that's like definitely a good way to be able to practice, especially if you're uncomfortable loading a heel hook. Like if that's part of like pulling really hard on it is something that's mentally hard, or you're not used to trying hard in that way. That's also a really good way to learn how to try hard is to just take a little bit of weight off so you're not having to pull as hard on that heel. Basically, if you're ever climbing a boulder and somebody says, oh, you just have to, like, oh, it feels impossible at first, but you just have to learn how to find the body position. If anybody's saying anything like that, usually a power spot is helpful to figure out how to get into that position that they're talking about. But that's also always a super frustrating thing that people say when they can't do a thing and they're like, oh yeah, it felt impossible for me at first, but then you just learn it and you're like, ah,
Right.
it's like believing in
Uh,
Santa Claus. Like Santa Claus, you're like, you're like, I just gotta believe it. We'll go one day.
any other tactics as it pertains to bouldering outdoors,
I think
choosing
everybody
spots?
should try to get better at spotting. Actually, now that I mention that, I think that's like,
Oh,
I think trusting your spotter is a really huge thing. I climb way better when I am climbing with people that I know and that I know are good spotters. Um, and yeah, I think if you're spotting well, like the amount of times that when I climb with the people that I know are good spotters and I fall, they usually ask me what happened or like where I fell, or because they don't see it. Like when you're a really good spotter, you're only looking at the person's hips to make sure that you're guiding their hips to the ground. Um, that's what I learned from. I had a gymnastics coach that was part of my climbing coaching staff when I was in my early 20s, and he was one of the most incredible spotters I've ever had. But he always would just say, you only look at the hips, like you're not looking at the person climbing or what their arms are doing or what their feet are doing. Um, and so when I am spotted by good spotters, they don't even know why I fell or barely where I fell because they're not paying attention to the holds or my hands or my feet, just your hips and body. Um, and I think you can really see that when you watch somebody who's a really good spotter. Um, there are a couple of good examples out there, but one is Alex Puccio's husband, Robin O'Leary. When she posts videos of him spotting her, he's like super close to her, but he just is right on her hips and just staring right at her hips and right there. And then when she falls, he does a really, really good job. He's a really excellent spotter. But yeah, I think just having more trust in your spotters and everybody sort of working on being really intentional with spotting is also just, for me, has been a really great, it's a tactic for sure, because then you just feel more confident doing what you're doing, and you can just have better, more open communication with your spotter about everybody's comfort levels with going for it, not going for it, doing this, putting a rope on it, maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't, this landing's kind of, bad, or it's good, or whatever. I think just having more communication and having people being more intentional about spotting is definitely a big deal.
All right, y'all, just a quick second here to shout out today's sponsor, which is the Kaya Climb app. If you're bouldering outdoors, or if you like to go check out bouldering areas, this app needs to be in your kit. I love it so much. They work with local experts to curate incredible guidebooks for over 50 of the top bouldering areas around and counting. We're talking GPS pinned coordinates to all the blocks, accurate descriptions, beautiful photos, and one of my favorite features, over 300,000 community uploaded beta videos. It's so good, it's so well designed. Hit that link below to try it for free. And if you upgrade to Kaya Pro to get even more features, well, use that link and you're gonna get 20% off. All right, get out there and crush. Let's get back to the video. So communication, key about what one thinks they're gonna do on a climb, where they might pop off, where they want some extra support, where they might want their pads, focusing on the hips, not being too wrapped up in the climb itself and where their hands going and getting caught up in the show of the climb. What else? Anything else that makes for a good spotter?
Asking people not to spot too is like also a thing. Like if you feel good about what the fall is going to be like and you just would rather hit the ground and not have that person standing there and they're like in your way or something, like that's also a fine thing to say. But just having people to climb with that you trust enough to be spotting you well, and that sort of understand, it's not like offensive necessarily if you're like asking them not to spot or just stand over there or to like move the pad a certain way or that kind of thing. Everybody has their preferences for pad setup and people spotting or not spotting or whatever that looks like. But just for me it's definitely been super crucial to have people I trust be climbing with me. I definitely am more successful that way. And even if I'm like that hasn't always been the case. Sometimes I end up having to go to a boulder alone, but I always benefit from going to that boulder first with those kind of people that I can talk to about the setup and if the pads look good and where to put them and all these kinds of things and figure out all the logistics of safety with people there. And then if I do have to go back alone, I'm confident that I know what I'm doing just because I've already talked it out with everybody.
Yeah, that's a great thing to highlight right there because it's not something I ever, because I'm just not close to boulders here. And whenever I climb, I've always got partners with me because it's like a trip that we're taking if I'm bouldering, and if I'm going route climbing, I've got a belayer. So that's interesting. Is there anything else that comes to mind when it comes to projecting or just going out for a day on boulders where it's just you and your pads?
I mean, definitely every single tactic that I've already talked about and all the other ones that we haven't talked about just become exponentially more important. I think, you just have to be, you just have to be aware of your own comfort level for sure. Like I've never been in a scenario where I'm doing like a super tall, super scary boulder by myself. It's usually ones that are low to the ground or that are close to the car. So I can do like 4 or 5 trips to bring all the pads up.
Right.
That kind of thing. Like you sort of have to make sure that those logistics are sound, or that it's literally a boulder that's you can pad with 2 pads and take your own pads to it. I mean, I know people who get pretty bold alone and are totally comfortable going for things that are really tall with limited pads because they're all at the start and you have nobody to move them back. I'm not one of those people. I know there are people that do that, but I think you just have to be aware of what your own comfort level is. And for me, if I can't pad the whole thing by myself, I won't go by myself for sure.